Committee members, the clerk has advised me we have a quorum, and those appearing virtually have been sound tested. The only one this morning is Madame Zarillo, and we are ready to begin. So I will call the meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 95 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Human Resources, Skills, Social Development, and the Status of Persons with Disabilities. Pursuant to the motion adopted on November 27, 2023, the committee is beginning its subject matter of supplementary estimates B202324. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format, meaning people are participating in person in the room and virtually. You have the option of choosing to speak in the official language of your choice. Interpretation services are available in the room using your headset. Those appearing virtually, click on the icon on the bottom of your surface and choose the language of your choice. If there is an interruption in interpretation, please get my attention, and we will suspend while it is being corrected. Also want to advise committee members that to be conscious of your mics near the headset, as well as your cell phone, as I found out at the last meeting. Keep it away because it can cause harm to the interpreters. So please keep your headsets away from the mic, as well as telephones as well. I remind those, please direct your questions and comments through myself, the chair. So appearing this morning in the first hour as witnesses are the Honourable Randy Bosanoff, MP, Minister of Employment, Workforce Development, and Official Language. Welcome, Minister. Always good to have you here. Honourable Kamal Khera, MP, Minister of Diversity, Inclusion, and Persons with Disabilities, as well as the Deputy Minister from the Department of Employment and Social Development, the Chief Financial Officer and Senior Assistant Deputy Minister, and the Senior Associate Deputy Minister are appearing as well. I understand that the ministers may choose to give opening comment. Okay, we'll begin with Mr. Bosanoff for 5 minutes, please.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Good morning, committee members. Let me acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. Merci de m'avoir invité à discuter.
Thank you for inviting me to discuss the Supplementary Estimates B for Employment and Social Development Canada.
To make my first appearance here at HUMA, and I want to start by sincerely thanking all committee members for the work that you do every week. I'm honored also to be here with my friend and colleague, Minister Khera. I was reflecting on the very mandate of this committee, which is to help build a more inclusive, more equitable, and better society. And the studies that HUMA conducts and the issues of the day that you dive into and the recommendations that you offer are of great value to Canadians and the ministers whose mandates you cover. And in this work, the Department of Employment, Social Development Canada is taking important steps. You can see that work reflected in the funding requests that we made under the supplementary estimates, and of some $93.5 billion in authorized spending already. Today we are talking about $409 million in SUPS B spending. Comme vous le savez, dans le cadre des
As you know, under the Workforce Development Agreements with provinces and territories, the Government of Canada provides funding for the design and delivery of programs tailored to local labour market conditions. In Budget 2023, we announced $200 million in new funding for the agreements as part of an additional $625 million for labour market agreements in 2023-2024. This amount is for a one-year extension.
Approximately $3 billion was provided annually to employers and individuals through labour market agreements that we negotiate with the provinces. And of this total, the Government of Canada has invested $922 million annually through the workforce development agreements. And this funding enables provinces and territories to provide skills training and employment programming with a focus on labour market development and those wishing to upskill. In short, we're getting workers across the country the resources they need to succeed. And of particular note, this particular funding can be used to support members of underrepresented groups such as Indigenous peoples, youth, older workers, persons with disabilities, and newcomers to Canada. Another significant issue for me, Mr. Chair and colleagues, is the safety of all workers. One particular priority for my team and I is the safety of those who come to Canada under the Temporary Foreign Worker Program. To that end, in SUPS B, we're asking for $12.1 million of supplementary funding for the Temporary Foreign Worker compliance regime. This added funding will allow the department to improve the employer compliance regime under the program, including more inspectors and the maintenance of the worker protection tip line. The workers operating under this program play a vital role in many sectors of our economy, particularly in agriculture, hospitality, construction, home building, caregiving, and the seafood industry. These workers sacrifice time away from their families and friends to support our food supply, security, and our economy. They're entitled to our thanks, and they're entitled even more to the same respect, protection, and rights of any worker. Any mistreatment or abuse of temporary foreign workers or any worker is always unacceptable and can never be tolerated. Nous demandons également
We are also requesting $10.6 million for the recognized employer pilot to address labor shortages and streamline processes for repeat employers who meet the highest standards for wages, working and living conditions, and worker protection. Mr. Chair, I will stop here. Dear colleagues, I'm happy to answer your questions.
See, Monsieur Boson.
Thank you, Mr. Boissonneau. Ms. Kera, you have 5 minutes.
Members, thank you again for giving me this opportunity to be before this committee. It's always a pleasure to be here with my colleagues and, of course, my good friend, Minister Boissonneau. Also very pleased, as my colleague mentioned, to be joined here with our incredible officials, Paul Thompson, Karen Robertson, and Christina. Christina is here. Sorry, I wasn't sure if it was Lori or... Good to have you, Christina. I also want to take this opportunity to first and foremost update you on the important items that we have delivered for Canadians this year. Before we begin, I think it's important to give the chair and committee members some context on diversity, inclusion, and disability in Canada. The newly released 2022 Canadian Survey on Disability finds that 27% of Canadians over the age of 15 self-identify as having a disability. That's 8 million Canadians who are limited in their day-to-day activities. At the same time, across the country, we have also seen an alarming rise in hate and division. This fall, local police agencies have reported a significant rise in hate crimes in cities and communities right across the country. It is clear that the work we're doing right now is more important than ever. And my goal as a minister is to create a more accessible and inclusive Canada, one where everyone, regardless of their ability or identity, is included. Now, when it comes to creating a more accessible Canada, our government has made a lot of progress. And I want to take a moment just to also thank this committee for the work that they've done in getting some of these extremely important pieces forward. When we first created the Accessible Canada Act, which led us to Canada's first ever Disability Inclusion Action Plan, which truly is a roadmap to building a more inclusive and barrier-free Canada. We recently convened the Disability Inclusion Business Council to champion and advance inclusion in Canadian workplaces. In 2022-2023, we provided over $47 million in funding to 75 businesses throughout the Opportunities Fund. This funding is helping give persons with disabilities the skills and the tools they need to succeed in the labor force, while also creating more accessible businesses. Moreover, in order to build a more accessible communities, this past year we provided $82 million in funding to over 1,000 organizations through our Enabling Accessibility Fund. And of course, in June, with the support of this committee and all members in this Parliament, our government made history when we passed legislation to create the Canada Disability Benefit and getting that to royal assent. And now we're building the benefit in the true spirit of nothing without us. This fall, Mr. Chair, we have been doing extensive consultations with the disability community. In fact, right now, a fully accessible public online consultation portals are open so that all Canadians, but in particular, Canadians with disabilities are able to give their feedback. Once implemented, Mr. Chair, it will be yet another historic step in our government's work to reduce poverty, as it will increase the financial security of working age persons with disabilities. And I look forward to updating this committee, the House, and all Canadians as we continue to push forward on this extremely important initiative. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair, I want to just briefly turn and talk a little bit about the work we're doing when it comes to creating a more diverse and inclusive Canada. I firmly believe that as a country, our greatest strength is our diversity. And I always say that, in Canada, diversity is a fact, but inclusion is a choice, and it is a choice that our government has been very deliberate in making from the very beginning. Now, since 2015, our government has been working with community partners to combat racism and hatred in all its form. As you know, in 2018, the Government of Canada officially recognized the UN Decade for the People of African Descent, and we've been taking this recognition very seriously. To that end, we have launched the Black Entrepreneurship Program, the Black Canadian Communities Initiative, and Black-led Philanthropic Endowment Fund, and of course, our Supporting Black Canadian Communities Initiative. Moreover, Mr. Chair, we launched Canada's first ever anti-racism strategy to combat all forms of racism in Canada, and to continue to build on the work of the strategy, we appointed Canada's first ever anti-racism secretariat. Additionally, we are hard at work at developing Canada's first ever action plan on combating hate. We've also, as you know, the work we're doing by hosting the national summits, we've certainly appointed, which has led us to appointments of 2 special envoys on combating Islamophobia and combating anti-Semitism in this country. And as you know, Mr. Chair, their work has never been more important than it is right now. Our diversity is what truly sets us apart from the rest of the world. It is at the core of who we are as Canadians, and I look forward to continuing to working with this committee and all Canadians to continue to build a Canada, more accessible and inclusive Canada for everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Minister. Just before we begin, I want to recognize my member of the legislature is joining us today in the public gallery. He's the leader of the opposition for Prince Edward Island, so he's in Ottawa participating, and he's the person that I go to complain when I can't complain to myself. So with that, welcome, Mr. Perry. We'll begin the first 6 minutes with Ms. Ferrari. Oh, sorry. Ms. Falk. My apologies.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, ministers, both for being here. Minister Boissonnault, my questions will be directed towards you. We know that the carbon tax is driving up the cost of food and home heating and fuel, and far too many have to decide between heating or eating. Some Atlantic Canadians are getting some temporary relief on the cost of their home heating because their MPs advocated for them. But Saskatchewanians and Albertans are left out in the cold. Given that you are one of 2 Liberal representatives in Alberta, and I've seen you at Saskatchewan events, so I imagine that you are the de facto Saskatchewan representative. Are we to understand that you did not advocate for a carbon tax relief for families in Western Canada?
Mr. Chair, I will call that question relevance, and I'll still answer it, because I think it's important that we have an adult conversation about what our government did when it comes to home heating across the country. Home heating oil and what we did to suspend home heating pricing on pollution as it relates to home heating for 3 years is to allow the most vulnerable in our society to actually go from home heating to heat pumps. And that includes Albertans, includes Saskatchewanians, includes people in Northern Ontario,
Minister,
Northern Quebec.
sorry, my time's really limited. I'm not hearing an answer there. How much do Canadian families have to suffer before your Liberal government will relent with their carbon tax?
Well, I think my answer directly is that we built a pipeline, Ms. Falk. And we built a pipeline that did nothing for my colleagues in downtown Toronto or Montreal or Burnaby. And why did we do that? So that families in Saskatchewan and Alberta can actually benefit, and that construction jobs across this country can benefit. It's one of the largest infrastructure projects we're building. And when it is finished, the coffers of Alberta and Canada will be better, and we will be exporting triple the amount of oil to the world. That's good for the energy sector, and it's good for Western Canadians.
Okay, great. Thanks, Minister. So the recently announced emissions cap is the latest attack on the Canadian energy workers and Canadian energy. It's effectively a cap on production. We know that. And yet again, another case of federal overreach. So as a Saskatchewan MP, I know how devastating your Liberal government's activist-driven agenda has been on the economic growth, on the province, and the livelihood of energy workers. So, Minister, as an Alberta MP, you have also firsthand seen this devastation. I know that. So, do you support an emissions cap that will kill jobs for hardworking Canadians in the energy industry?
What I support is making sure that the greenest barrel of oil is found in Western Canada. And what we have in
Do you
place
support
is
that cap? The
I
emissions
support
cap?
a cap on emissions, not a cap on production. And what we have in place is an emissions cap, not a production cap. Ms. Falk, I could not go outside in Monday of the long weekend of May or September this year because the air quality index was 11.5. I'm sure that your children and children across this country want to make sure that MPs right now are doing everything they can to make sure that we're fighting climate change. In the middle of COVID, in Edmonton Centre, people were asking me to make sure that our government fought climate change. We're doing so in a way that, guess what? In 2024, we're going to have an increase in the numbers of drilling rigs out in Alberta. So we are
Minister,
able to decouple
So you're
growth.
admitting then that oil and gas is not going anywhere in the foreseeable future.
I have always said that the
So
industry will continue to grow, and guess what? We're going to have production increases.
you are telling
in our
Canadians
emissions
that
caps.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. I think the witness should be given an opportunity to answer questions.
Thank you, Ms. Van Buinen. The time is Ms. Falk's. Ms. Falk.
Thank you, Chair. So we know that oil and gas is not going anywhere. You just admitted that. So you're telling Canadians that you'd rather send dollars to dictators than ensure that Canadians have good, stable, well-paying jobs. You are telling Canadians that you would rather see oil and gas produced in countries with less environmental regulations, with less human rights regulations and standards when it comes to labor than here in Canada. Do you agree that this policy will only cause Canada to become more reliant on dirty dictator oil?
Let's agree that if you don't try to put words in my mouth, I won't put words in yours. Dow Chemical, $11 billion in the heartland. Air Products, $1.6 billion net zero plant. Heidelberg Materials, the first net zero cement plant in the world. These investments come because our government is putting in investments to attract green industries. And guess what? We are the third country right now for foreign direct investment. And if you do a per capita analysis, we beat the United States, we beat China, and we beat Brazil. So it's about good paying jobs in the energy sector as we decouple emissions from
We do know
growth.
billions of dollars have left this country, though, due to your government's ineffective policies.
Actually, it's
we know
due
that
to
if your
Premier
government was
Smith
actually
putting a
interested, it's my time,
moratorium on
Minister.
renewables.
It's my minister, or sorry, it's my time, Minister. Thank you. If your government was actually interested in good public policy, it would work with provinces and respect their jurisdiction. We all know that recently the Supreme Court ruled that the No More Pipelines Bill, C-69, was unconstitutional. And it affirmed that the province's jurisdiction over their natural resources. So do you accept the Supreme Court's ruling?
So if we're going to be specific, it was an opinion. And the opinion of the Supreme Court...
Do you accept it?
We always accept the opinions of the Supreme Court, and we are going to make sure that we make adjustments to our policies. And I think you will see
So how
emissions...
are you going to justify supporting a policy that once again tramples over provincial jurisdiction, which was C-69? So what is the government going to change if they take these opinions seriously?
I think the proof's in the pudding that TMX is getting built and will be fully operational in 24.
We know that the PBO has confirmed that C-234 would have saved farmers $1 billion between now and 2030. And to be clear, it's $1 billion that your Liberal government is intent on collecting on the backs of our farmers. So why did your government direct Liberal-appointed senators to delay and gut this bill that would have thrown a lifeline to our farmers?
Unlike your party, Ms. Falk, there are no senators that come to our caucus meeting every week. And
But they're
no
appointed by
direction
the
given
Prime
to those.
Minister. Most of them, I mean, Roger Kusner, Liberal,
Your time
former
is up.
member of Parliament.
Thank you. I just want to remind committee members, when one talks over the other, it causes problems for the interpreters. So they just asked me to raise that. Please respect that part. And these ministers are in here at the request of the committee to address issues topical to their ministries. With that, I will go to Mr. Van Buinen for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the opportunity of having a chance to meet with the ministers and hear back from them. And contrary to what we've seen so far, I'll give you an opportunity to respond. So my first question will be to Minister Boissonnault. Minister, I think lots of us have been very disappointed in recent weeks by attacks from the Conservatives on the transformational investments that we're making in EV battery production, specifically most recently with respect to the plant in Windsor. Can you talk about how important this work is and how important the role of foreign workers are to get the battery started so that we can go forward and create long-term permanent jobs in Windsor?
Well, Mr. Chair, I thank the question from MP Van Bynen, and I think what you're seeing is a tectonic plate shift in terms of our decision in Canada to be a country that makes things, not that just exports things. And for a lot of our life, we've been, drawers of water and hewers of wood, and we send it off to other countries to actually get the value-added jobs. And now we are changing that approach, and we're going to make sure that our children and our children's children are actually part of a supply chain that is going to provide not just batteries, but that's going to extract and refine the critical minerals to get to those batteries that we're going to see across the country, whether it's Stellantis or Northvolt, or what we're seeing in Newfoundland and Labrador, what we're seeing in Atlantic Canada, what we're seeing in Edmonton, and some of the examples that I've already mentioned. The Stellantis plant is just one example of 2,500 good long-term paying union jobs once the plant is up. At least 1,600 construction jobs from Canadians. And I think we have to have an adult conversation of what it means to have technical experts from another country come to our country to help do the technology transfer. There's a technology company in Calgary that's called Ever, and it does deep downhole drilling, geothermal drilling to provide heat and electricity. And we've exported this technology to Germany right now. And guess what? There aren't any technicians that understand how to do this deep geothermal drilling. Guess which technical experts are going to Germany to set up the shop and do tech transfer? Canadian engineers, Canadian geophysics, Canadian drillers. Are we saying that South Koreans shouldn't be able to send over their technicians to actually help Canadians understand how we do battery plant? We've never built batteries in this country before, and we actually need the expertise of our friends from Korea, our trading partners, under a free trade deal signed by the Conservatives to actually be able to come up and set up shop. And what's really dangerous, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Bynen and other colleagues, is that if the Conservatives turn up the rhetoric too hot, David Cassidy said this, Local 444 union president, there's another $3 billion plant that's an ancillary plant that could go to us or go to Mexico. And if the Conservatives are talking about doom and gloom and the sky falling with some workers coming to help us do tech transfer, that $3 billion plant is at risk. And I don't want to see foreign direct investment scared away because of misinformation.
Thank you. My next question then is to Minister Kira. Minister, we've put an awful lot of work in this committee. I've seen the success that we've had with the Canada Disability Benefit. Can you provide a timeline in which Canadians with disabilities can expect to see money in their bank accounts?
Thank you for that really important question. And let me just first and foremost say thank you to this incredible committee who I know did relentless work in making Canada Disability Benefit legislation a reality. It is also because of the tireless advocacy of the disability community who has been working extremely hard advocacy for many, many decades to make this a reality for so many Canadians. And let me also be very clear, getting Canada Disability Benefit right and getting it out quickly as possible is a top priority of mine in this mandate. We, Mr. Van Duyben, as you know, since the Canada Disability Benefit received royal assent in June of 2022. We have been doing extensive consultations with the disability community, particularly on the design and regulations of this benefit. I myself have met with many individuals with persons with disabilities themselves. As you can imagine, there's a lot of diversity in the group in terms of and making sure that we're looking at it with that intersectionality, particularly when you talk to women with disabilities, or you talk to youth with disabilities, you talk to seniors with disabilities. And it's really important that we get that diverse perspective and to ensure that we get this benefit right in the true spirit of nothing without us. As we speak right now, November of I want to say November 21st was the date, I think, when we had the public online consultations, which are fully accessible, that are open right now. And I hope that all Canadians, and particularly those with disabilities, will participate in this very important work, because we need to make sure we can hear as many perspectives as possible in getting this benefit out right. Tony, we remain absolutely committed to the original timelines. This act, as you know, must come into force by June of 2024, and regulations must be in place by June of 2025. And I'm absolutely committed to getting this right and as quickly as possible.
Thank you. So in addition to making sure that people with disabilities aren't below the poverty line, it's important to make sure that workers have an opportunity to be contributing fully to society. So can you tell us or give us an overview, an update, providing the ongoing work under the Disability Inclusion Action Plan?
Absolutely. And this is a really important question, because as you would recall, when we got elected back in 2015, one of the very first things that we did as a government was to work alongside parties and pass Canada Accessibility Act, which has led us to have a Disability Inclusion Action Plan, which truly is a roadmap to create a barrier-free Canada by 2040. And in fact, I hope we can do it sooner than that. That has 4 really important pillars. One is first and foremost around financial security. And as I mentioned, the Canada Disability Benefit is a big proponent of making that happen. But one of the second points is employment. I think ensuring that we are working with persons with disabilities, making sure they have the skills that they need to be able to fully participate in the labor force. In fact, we're doing a lot of work very closely with my colleague, Mr. Bossino, and his shop to have an employment strategy for persons with disabilities. Recently, we just, a year ago, we launched a Canada Disability Business Council, which is bringing together private sector to be able to see, we all can't do this work alone. We need to ensure that businesses are part of that. And just last week, we launched...
Thank you, Minister. You can conclude that in another question. Madame Chabot, à vous pour 6 minutes.
You have 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Minister, Madam Minister, for coming here today. My question goes to you, Mr. Minister Boissonnault. I would have liked to find money dedicated to the general reform of the unemployment insurance in the expenses stated, but there was nothing there. Mr. Minister, you know that this was a firm commitment made by your government in 2015, reiterated in 2019 and in 2021, particularly the Prime Minister gave to your predecessor the following mandate: establish a new unemployment insurance system that is more inclusive. That had to be done in the summer of 2022. Now we are at the end of 2023. Minister Boissonnault, is there going to be an overall reform of the unemployment insurance system to correct the inequalities that exist? Is this still a priority for your government? Answer. Mr. Chair, I would like to thank Madam Chabot for her excellent question. If the member would allow, I would like to reiterate the fact that the issue of unemployment insurance is the most important program we have to support our workforce and the labor force that supports about 2 million Canadians every year, particularly when when they're out of a job, they need to help their families or they need to reskill. And to answer Madam Chabot directly, the Government of Canada will continue to reinforce our social fabric, our social security system, by creating a resilient unemployment insurance system. And we will continue working against the inflation in the short term. Mr. Chair and Madam Chabot, we will come up with measures to enhance the contributions we have in place. If you look at the pandemic, this highlights the weaknesses that exist in the system, which existed for a long time, I may say. And I believe it is important for the unemployment insurance system be able to help families meet their needs. As far as what we've done already is concerned, you go ahead. Well, my question is very clear. Right now, I heard you talk about a robust system. My question is it still a priority for your government? You have just said that The Social Security System is a federal program. We are talking about a federal program with weaknesses. It's broken. Even after the pandemic, we said that there were lots of delays in repairing the system. There are accessibility problems. This system is supported by contributions from employers and employees. And right now, 6 out of 10 employees who contribute do not have access because of outdated eligibility criteria and discrimination and inequities that exist. All this has been demonstrated. Your predecessor, after 2 years of consultations, where workers seriously committed themselves in the process, the problems are known, the solutions are known. What prevents you from acting right now, Mr. Minister? To answer and to talk about what we've done, Mr. Chair, we enhanced the sick leave for 6 weeks. For Quebec, I would like to tell Ms. Chabot that we've extended the waiting period and added 6 weeks, and this is helping people in Gaspésie, Quebec Central, Quebec Northwest, and other places as well. And now we have benefits for other parents. It's not meeting the demands of the unions and the workers. I met unions from Quebec and others, the Federation of Workers in Quebec. They were surprised that we were able to add 4 weeks. They're asking us to do more. I am guided by fiscal prudence. When you talk about 4 additional weeks, you need to talk of other things. We are talking about pilot projects for workers in the seasonal industry. This doesn't concern only Quebec. There are interprovincial tables that include many provinces and unemployed people. So this concerns entire industries that invited me. This is a pilot project that has existed since 2018 that you extend year after year with 5 weeks. But your government made 2 commitments: make it permanent and enhance it. But this is not the 4 additional weeks that is going to resolve the problems faced by these employees. Would you like to accept to meet them? Because they've made a request for you to meet them to know the realities of the regions. I also met a number of unions and the Union of Democratic Employees. I met many groups, so I'm concerned by this issue. I want to make sure that we have an unemployment system that is there for the benefit of modern workers, and I will continue to be guided by fiscal prudence. But I have heard you clearly, Madam Chabot. Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Madam.
Zarello, 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this time last year, the disability community and the government asked this committee to fast track the Canada Disability Benefit legislation. We did that. Yet it has been a year, and here we are with no money in people's pockets. Many persons with disabilities are living on less than $10,000 a year. The government's delay cannot continue, and it's actually breaking the trust that was extended to them from this committee and the community. So, Mr. Chair, I have a motion today, and I ask all of my colleagues to support it. So the motion is that given that 22% of Canadians live with a disability, but make up 41% of those who live in poverty, and that the rising cost of housing, food, and medication is causing a cycle of poverty for persons living with a disability, and that the Canada Disability Benefit has not yet been delivered to Canadians, and the government has declined to implement a disability emergency relief benefit, that the committee report to the House that it asks the federal government to commit that the Canada Disability Benefit be implemented and immediately delivered to persons with disabilities in the first quarter of 2024. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Cirillo, is that a question to Madame Kara?
No, it is a motion to the committee.
Oh, sorry, but you did not move it. You just
So
read.
I'd like to move a motion to committee, Mr. Chair. Would you like me to read it again?
Given Madame Cirillo, yes, if you would read. If you
Sorry,
would
so
move it.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move a motion to the committee. I'm hoping that all will support it. That given that 22% of Canadians living with a disability but make up 41% of those who live in poverty, that the rising cost of housing, food, and medication is causing a cycle of poverty for persons living with a disability, and that the Canada Disability Benefit has not yet been delivered to Canadians, and the government has declined to implement a disability emergency relief benefit, that the committee report to the House that it asks the federal government to commit that the Canada Disability Benefit be implemented and immediately delivered to persons with disabilities in the first quarter of 2024. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Cirillo. Yes, your motion is in order and is on the floor for debate. Mr. Pragasketos, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Chair, and I offer this comment in good faith to MP Cirillo. I wonder if we can defer debate on the motion because I know members do have questions for ministers who are here, and this is not to say that the motion is not important, that we can't engage in it. As I say, I'm just asking for it to be deferred so that members around the table can ask questions of ministers.
Madame Chabot and Mr. Aitchison on the motion currently before committee by Madame Cirillo. Madame Chabot.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the motion moved by my colleague, Madame Cirillo, I will be supporting that motion. The work that has been done here on this committee for the Canada Disability Benefits was major. I think there were lots of representations. We know the process underway, but what she's saying in this motion is that we speed up the process to ensure that during the first quarter, these benefits see light of day for those who need it most. So I agree. So I will be supporting the motion, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madame Chabot. Mr. Aitchison on the motion of Madame Chabot.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I think the motion makes complete sense and agree with everything that's been said, and don't know if we need to spend too much time debating on it. I would just call for a vote right away.
Mr. Coteau?
Just in regards to order, point of order.
Okay.
It's just. No, I think that's the question I was going to ask. Yeah, I think every member has the right to speak on the issue. Am I correct?
Mr. Coteau, you have the floor.
Yeah. So in regards to process, so I'm, obviously I think every single person on this committee is supportive of the benefit and making sure that people who need the most help are getting the help they need. We sat in this committee and listened to many different witnesses talk about the challenges that they face and how the benefit would really contribute to strengthening themselves and their families. But I guess one of the concerns I would have is in regards to implementation of such an ambitious plan. By putting forward a motion like this that's very descriptive to government, it's actually intervening in the process that I'm assuming is taking place within the department. So my one caution would be, if we're very specific in regards to timelines, it may be problematic for the department to implement it properly. So that would be one of the concerns I would bring up. And I think, maybe it could be worded in a way that expressed our interest as a committee. But there's no question that a committee, should not be prescribing specific actions to the department that's left, of course, to government and to the House of Commons to do in regards to the will of the majority. So that's the only caution I'd like to bring up, and maybe we can rephrase a few of the words to better express that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Before I go to Mr. Fracascato, I'm going to ask the clerk to explain why I'm proceeding with the procedure. Madam Clerk, on Mr. H's.
Yes, so this motion is debatable. So the chair recognized Mr. Coteau and gave him the floor. There are some motions that are non-debatable, and that's where we would go straight to a vote.
Mr. Fracascato, on the motion.
Chair, I'd just ask if we could take a 3 or 4 minute pause.
Sure. Okay, we'll suspend for 3 minutes.
Suspension.
Committee is back in session. Currently before the floor, we have a motion from Madame Chabot. And at this moment, Madame Zarrillo, and Madame Zarrillo has her hand up. Madame Zarrillo, you have the floor.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and I would like to just call the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Madame Zarrillo. Madame Zarrillo has called for a vote on the motion that is currently before the floor. The motion was not amended, and
Chair.
there's been a vote called. Given that,
She's calling the
Advise me, Mr. Long has the right to speak on the motion. On the motion.
Thank you, Chair. And, I just, right, I just wanted to state that, obviously, we understand MP Zarillo's motion. We understand the passion behind it, but also, just for the record, these bills, these benefits do take time, and there's a lot of consultation with provinces that has not happened yet. It's a major undertaking. So I would say there's nobody that doesn't want to see this benefit roll out, but there's also, I think, legitimate concern that it's rolled out correctly, that we do not leave people behind. And the concern is just to peg it to, first quarter, I think risks us not doing it completely right. And I do know, I can certainly speak to my province of New Brunswick, that these conversations and negotiations are very, very challenging, Chair. And I respectfully, I ask MP Zarillo to consider that. Thank you.
Seeing Mr. Coteau.
Just a quick question to the clerk, just for clarity. A motion like this, even if it is passed, it doesn't compel government to do anything. It's just really, I'm assuming, right? Is that correct? Like a committee can't compel government to do things. It's a legit question. So if this passes, what happens?
The motion gets delivered to the floor to have the comments.
That's it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Discussion, I'm going to go to a recorded vote on, as requested, on the motion of Madame Zarillo. Everybody clear? Okay. C'est bon. Go.
Mr. Fragiscaros?
Yes.
Mr. Long?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Coteau?
In favor?
Mr. Van Binden?
Yes.
Mrs. Gray?
Yes.
Mrs. Falk?
Yes.
Mrs. Ferrari?
Yes.
Mr. Aitchison?
Yes.
Madame Chabot?
Oui.
Mrs. Zarillo?
Yes.
11 yeas, 11 pour, 0 nays, 0 contre.
The motion, Madame Zarillo, has approved unanimously, and your time has expired. We'll now go to Miss Gray for 5 minutes. To the ministers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the ministers for being here today. My questions are for Minister Boissonnault. Looking forward to 2024, is it estimated Canada's unemployment rate will be going up or down?
That is information that we actually look at in the rearview mirror. But as we can take a look at the most recent numbers, to answer your question directly, just since September, we have numbers that have gone down from 780,200 to the most recent numbers in November of 632, Ms. Gray. And we're waiting for the Q3 numbers, which will give us a sense of labor force development. So I'm not going to speculate on employment going up or down, but labor force is strong, which is showing that unemployment's trending
Minister,
downward.
in the fall economic statement, it actually projects that unemployment is expected to rise to 6.5% by next spring. So that's right in the fall economic statement. So based on that, do you have a plan to deal with this projected unemployment increase that was in your fall economic statement?
The unemployment system is there to catch people when they need supports, whether it's through being laid off from work, whether it's for benefits, for training. And so the system is robust and it's ready to handle any downturn in the economy. The current data that we're seeing, though, is trending in the opposite way.
My question is, Minister, do you have a plan on how to deal with this unemployment that is projected from your fall economic statement? And do you believe that food bank usage will be increasing based on the fact that unemployment is expected to increase next year based on your own fall economic statement?
I'm not going to speculate on food bank use, but I do understand that food bank use recently is on the rise, and that's certainly a question that I would have you direct to my colleague, Minister Suds. But as it comes to having a plan, absolutely, the employment system is there to support
So
2
you have
million
a
people.
plan, Minister. Would you be able to table that plan for this committee?
The plan is included in negotiations that we have with labor market training agreements with 13 provinces and territories. That
Great. Well,
those
Minister, you just
conversations
said
will
that you
happen in
have
the
a
new
plan
year.
to deal with unemployment. So if you could table that plan for this committee?
I'm happy to table what we are working on with the provinces when that passes through governmental
Great,
channels.
thank you, Minister. So after the large projected spike in unemployment next year, how long will it take for unemployment to get back to current levels as projected?
Paul, do we have some information on, or do we have any information on?
Actually,
when?
Minister, we can bring the officials back at another time, so I'm just
It's my right to
questioning
turn to
yourself.
officials, Ms. Gray, and I'm turning to an official.
Okay, well, fair enough. I'll just move on then, Minister.
Sure.
Thank you. So actually, in the fall economic statement, it actually states that it will take 5 years for unemployment to come back to current levels, and that's right in your fall economic statement going to 2028. Looking at EI premiums right now, will workers see a increase, or would they see the EI premiums being the same going into 2024 as they are right now, or are they planned to increase?
So the chief actuary we have raised the premiums to 166 up from 163, and we get advice from the chief actuary every year to that effect. And currently, EI premiums are 22 cents below where they were when the current leader of the opposition was
So
EI
Minister, in budget 2023, did your government commit to keeping the EI premiums the same?
We committed to keeping EI premiums at 166 until we get advice from the chief actuary.
So, yes or no, under the Employment Act, do you have the power to cancel these increases?
I take the advice from the chief actuary, and the reason I take the advice is so that we can make sure in the case of the EI fund that it is whole by 2030, and I take the advice of the chief actuary seriously.
So this is a promise that was made by your government in budget 2023. So is this a promise that you decided to break once you became minister in this role, or was this always the intention to break that promise to workers?
There's never an intention to break promises to workers. We want to make sure that the EI system is robust. To your earlier question, should unemployment go up to 6.5, we want to make sure that the EI fund is well capitalized to help those people that might be facing unemployment.
So, Minister, your government's proposed benefits delivery modernization program is years behind schedule and running billions over cost. Can you confirm that the benefits delivery modernization will now cost taxpayers $8 billion, as has been reported?
What I can confirm for you, Chair, to Ms. Gray, is that benefits modernization is to be able to allow us to get $15 trillion worth of benefits out to people.
Minister, have you requested a briefing on the benefits modernization program?
This is a program that is in the bailiwick of Minister Beach, who I understand will be appearing at this
Minister, but
committee.
these include systems such as EI, OAS, and CPP, which are under your purview.
We're just getting through the OAS phase now, and then we'll be into the EI phase, and then we'll be into the CPP. This is not a one-phase program. This is a program that takes place over years,
so it
and
is
it's
within your
billions of
purview.
dollars so that we get it right.
Thank you.
We now move to Mr. Coteau for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to both ministers and officials for being here. There's no question that both of your portfolios are very important for the success of this country. I wanted to speak specifically about anti-racism and people with disabilities, and really just start by saying that I think, Minister Kerr, I think your file is probably one of the most important files in government. Because it talks about our future, it talks about our opportunity, where we're going as a country when it comes to, opening up opportunity. We can build opportunity by, through investing in industry. We can build opportunity by, bringing skilled workers to Canada. But we can also bring opportunity to this country by opening up opportunity for people, leveraging, our workforce that's here to better participate and build this country. And I know that people living with disabilities, and anti-racism is a moral imperative, but it's also an economic imperative as well. We know that if a person reaches their full potential, it contributes to our economy. It contributes to our well-being as a country. So anti-racism work, I know, to this government has been one of its key pillars, looking for ways to create more inclusion, diversity, and opportunity for all people. And I know that this was the first government that's, federally that's put in place an anti-racism strategy. And I was hoping that you can take a few minutes to talk about the anti-racism strategy, where we're coming from, where we're going, and how this is going to benefit Canadians overall. Because even though it may actually specifically speak to a person who may face discrimination, it actually speaks to the benefit of all Canadians, because when that person who faces discrimination has a barrier removed, it contributes to the well-being of every person in this country. So if you can talk a bit about that, I'd appreciate it.
MP Couto, for that very important question, and for your leadership in this space as well, because you and I have had many conversations around the work that needs to be done. I always say, diversity is a fact in Canada, which we know, but inclusion is a choice. And it is a choice that our government since 2015 has been very deliberate in making, ensuring that we're bringing those perspectives at the table at every front. And you're absolutely right. We have to be very deliberate in bringing the voices of some of the most vulnerable in our communities, whether it is and looking at it with, individuals that haven't had those opportunities in the past. Yes, and you're absolutely right. It is our government that put forward our Canada's first ever anti-racism strategy, which has led us to the work around having first and foremost an anti-racism secretariat. And the work they're doing is a framework around taking a whole of government approach, that intersectional approach to addressing racial inequities, but also ensuring that we are looking and combating hate when we see it. And I think to your point around where we have to be very deliberate in making those choices, that has led us to do the work within communities. I'll give you an example of the work that we've done, with the UN Decade for the People of African Descent that has led us to make these very important policies and programs in place. The work around the Black Entrepreneurship Program, it is around supporting Black individuals, getting them the capital that they need to start businesses. The work we're doing with the Supporting Black Communities Initiative, it is Black-led, Black-serving organizations that are doing this work on the ground to support communities, or the work around the Black Philanthropic Endowment Fund. These are things that actually matter, because we have to be very deliberate in including people if we want to have a really inclusive Canada. And it's the same model that the work that's happening under the Disability Inclusion Action Plan. As I was chatting earlier around our second pillar of the Disability Inclusion Action Plan, which is around employment. And I remember I was actually near riding not too long ago with an organization, March for Dimes, who does incredible work. It's around matching the skills of individuals with disabilities where we actually need people. This is an untapped potential of individuals that we need to ensure that we're including. We're doing this work with our employment strategy within the disability community. We actually just last week, MP Couto, through our Disability Inclusion Business Council, just launched a network of businesses, like Manulife, like IBM, that others, you need to get private sector also on board to be able to see those best practices, to see how they can build inclusive communities, to make sure individuals with disabilities are coming on board, and to share those best practices with other individuals. Because you said it's not just the right thing to do, it actually is around building an economic argument for Canada. And when we include people, Canada wins. So this is a really inclusive work that we're doing, and I'm very proud of the work that we're doing in this community, particularly to be able to move forward on the agenda of inclusion.
Thank you, Madam Minister. Mr. Couto, Madame Chabot, pour 2 minutes et demi.
Merci, Monsieur. Thank you, Chair. Minister Boissonnault, it's a good thing that you were able to meet with the major unions in Quebec on the employment insurance matter. There's no doubt that it's a priority just for the movement, just as it is for the movement of unemployed people. We are extremely disappointed that we have not received any response about that. That is not a priority for your government. That is what I retain from your answer. There's another file on which you've made some action, which is a commitment, the tripartite tribunal. It was adopted about a year ago, if I'm not mistaken. To my knowledge, nothing has been done for that file to move forward. Could we have some information about that, please? Yes, indeed. Just to be clear, for now, we have 1.2 million Canadians who are unemployed, and now 6. So what we're seeing is that there are less vacancies, which means that the jobs are increasing and unemployment is declining. When it comes to organizations to fund the tripartite council or tribunal, we are here to make sure that the unions have their voice in the system. And that is why Minister O'Regan and I last week made an announcement. There's going to be a first meeting for a table led by unions to provide more information. We shall continue improving the situation without dropping other issues. With service delivery, we are looking using the lens of this tripartite council. Mr. Minister, I'll come back to the first part of your response. It's not because the unemployment level is at its lowest that we shouldn't think about reforms. To the contrary, let's not wait for the next crisis to protect our social safety net, which is employment insurance. Your government and you as minister will have to look at this situation. If you have to ensure full safety when it comes to the rights of workers who sometimes do not qualify for the system that is now in place.
C'est bien noté, Monsieur le Président.
It's noted, Mr. Chair and Madam Chabot.
Madam Chabot.
Thank you, Madam Chabot.
First hour, we will.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
before we adjourn into the next portion, I noticed that today is the deadline for briefs to be submitted for the volunteerism, the intergenerational volunteerism. And since the meeting, our final meeting is being postponed to January, I'd like to extend the option for people to submit briefs until that date.
Mr. Van Bynen requested extending the deadline for written briefs on the intergenerational study
until the week of January 24th, which is when we're scheduled for the last meeting.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Hear that?
I'm a little bit confused because I think that Mr. Van Bynen said our next meeting won't be till January. Does that mean that our meeting on Wednesday has been canceled? Okay.
On intergenerational
Sorry,
witnesses.
the next meeting for the witnesses for the intergenerational. Okay.
Yeah, is
Sorry, I should
in
have
late
been more
January.
clear.
Is that the wish of the committee to extend the deadline? Okay.
Thank you.
You're great. Sorry with that. No, the meeting is suspended while we transition to the second hour. Thank you, Ministers Boissonnault and Kara and your staff for coming. We will now suspend. We're suspended for 5 minutes until we transition. If you could take your seats, we are about to begin the second hour. Call the meeting back to order. Welcome Minister Sean Fraser, Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities, and Minister Jenna Sudds, Minister of Families, Children and Social Development. Welcome to the committee. And we have from the Deputy Minister, Paul Thompson, Department of Employment and Social Development, Karen Robertson, Chief Financial Officer, Andrew Brown, Associate Deputy Minister. We'll begin with up to 5 minute opening statements, beginning with Minister Fraser. Minister Fraser, you have the floor.
And Chair, before I begin, is that 5 minutes combined or 5 minutes each? Okay, I expect I'll be a bit shorter than that. That's fine. Chers collègues, c'est un plaisir d'être ici.
Dear colleagues, I'm delighted to be here. In advance, Merry Christmas, everyone.
To discuss the supplementary estimates. The last time I was here, I spent some time going over some of the measures that we were rolling out with a view to build more homes across Canada to help address the supply gap that exists. As a quick reminder, the pillars of the path forward will involve policies designed to make the math work for home builders. That's where measures like the GST being removed from apartment construction comes in. It's where the rental construction financing initiative, which provides low-cost loans to builders, comes in. It's where the changes to the Canada Mortgage Bond that's going to reduce the rate of borrowing for builders comes in. The second pillar is really making the math work, rather not making the math work, it was number one, changing the way that cities build homes. We've had significant success concluding agreements with municipalities across Canada that are going to change fundamentally the way they permit and zone for more housing, to build more near transit, near post-secondary institutions, near opportunities and services that people need. The third pillar was really directly investing in community housing, housing for low-income families who would not otherwise have a place to live. There's a number of ways that we do that, including measures that were recapitalized in the recent fall economic statement through the Affordable Housing Fund. And we've had a history of doing this through different programs such as the Rapid Housing Initiative, the Co-Investment Fund, and others over the course of the past number of years. The next pillar is really focusing on growing the productive capacity of the Canadian workforce. You will have seen in the fall economic statement certain measures targeting labor mobility, for example. Going forward, you should expect to see a continued desire to invest in the skilled trades to build more homes, as well as targeted immigration programs to attract the workers we need that we do not have currently, and importantly, helping industry tool up to build more homes and factories. We also need to continue to focus on some of society's most vulnerable by investing in local efforts that will be led typically by municipal organizations, municipal governments or organizations on the ground to address homelessness across Canada. And finally, there's new measures that we've put in place to help people stay in the market or get in the market when it comes to home ownership. I'm thinking, for example, of the First Home Savings Account, which now has seen more than 300,000 people, disproportionately young people, sign up to take advantage of a tax-free opportunity to get into the market, or the recent inclusion of the Mortgage Charter outlining what consumers ought to be entitled to when they deal with their financial institution. One of the things to tie this back to the reason that we're here is that it takes investment to achieve each of these policy outcomes that I think we all would like to see. The measures that we put in place go through a parliamentary process to determine whether we're going to actually back the policy commitments with funding. What transpired last week in the House of Commons was a series of votes on a number of different measures that are designed to properly fund some of the initiatives included in the housing plan. For example, direct investments in affordable housing through the Co-Investment Fund and Rapid Housing Initiative were deliberately separated and voted upon. The same is true about our low-cost financing programs that get more homes built. The same is true for shelters that are providing and transition housing, that's providing support to some of the most vulnerable, women and children in particular, and it included funding directly for veterans' homelessness. You can imagine, Chair, my disappointment, though perhaps not my surprise, when I saw that the Conservative Party made a point to specifically vote down each of these measures. Thankfully, we garnered support from other parties in the House of Commons, and we're able to move forward with the funds that's going to allow us to deliver on some of these very specific policy ideas. In the interest of time, Mr. Chair, I'll leave my comments there, but rest assured I'll be prepared to take whatever questions committee members may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Fraser. Minister Sudds for 5 minutes or less.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members. Thank you for inviting me to join you here today. Je suis ravie d'être ici aujourd'hui pour faire.
I'm delighted to be here today to provide you an update on the progress that pertains to my portfolio as Minister of Families, Children and Social Development. The Canadian government is focused on delivering the policies and programs that would improve the lives of families in Canada and to make them more affordable.
When we introduced the Canada Child Benefit. The CCB is a tax-free and based on income so that it provides more support to families who need help the most. It's also indexed annually to keep pace with the cost of living. The CCB increased by 6.3% this year, which means that low-income families are receiving up to $7,437 per child under 6 and up to $6,275 per child aged 6 to 17 to help pay for everyday living expenses. N'oublions pas, no plus de...
Let's not forget all the work that has been done to create a Can-Canadian system for early learning and childcare system. As you know, in 2021, the Government of Canada made a transformative investment of nearly $30 billion to build a Canada-wide early learning and childcare system with provincial, territorial, and Indigenous partners.
Agreements with every province and territory to reduce parent fees for regulated childcare to an average of $10 a day, create 250,000 new regulated childcare spaces across the country by March 2026, and better support a well-qualified early childhood education workforce. The families of hundreds of thousands of children are already benefiting from more affordable childcare. 6 provinces and territories are offering childcare for $10 a day or less, and in every other jurisdiction, fees for regulated childcare have been cut on average by 50%. Helping put money back into people's pockets. In Alberta, for example, families can save up to $10,300 annually per child, allowing families to move into a larger apartment or make the maximum annual contributions to their RESP. In Ontario, potential annual savings are up to $8,500 per child, which could cover the cost of annual undergrad tuition at McMaster or Queen's, for example, and allow an older child or parent to enroll in university. Cela dit, l'objectif n'a jamais été...
That being said, the objective was never to only reduce fees. We also want to stimulate economic growth.
Every dollar we've invested in early learning and childcare, the broader economy would receive between $1.50 and $2.80 in return. And increasing access to more affordable and flexible childcare helps parents, especially mothers, enter or re-enter the job market. À beaucoup d'endroits au Canada,
in many parts of Canada, the labor force participation for working-age women with young children has reached record high levels of nearly 80%.
Childcare where it's needed most requires increasing the availability of regulated spaces. In response to requests from provinces and territories, the federal government is investing $625 million over 4 years in an early learning and childhood infrastructure fund, with $75 million of this amount being requested through Supplementary Estimates B. Through this fund, provinces and territories will be able to make key infrastructure investments that will support greater inclusion of underserved communities. We're also working in collaboration with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis partners to ensure affordable and culturally specific early learning and childcare is available. To help grow these programs in underserved communities, the government is invested $441 million over 4 years to respond to Indigenous early learning and childcare Indigenous priorities. In closing, les investissements que nous faisons en
This funding will provide significant improvements to Canadians and to our economy.
Working with my colleagues to support hardworking Canadians across the country and provide children with the best possible start in life. With that, I welcome any questions.
Minister,
Thank
and I
you.
understand you're going to be in my home province later this week to make a childcare announcement with the government of Prince Edward Island. Thank you. Looking forward to it. Monsieur Aitchison pour 6 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'd like to ask the Minister of Housing a couple of questions. Minister, the have asked for more money. I want to focus on the Housing Accelerator Fund. Would you say that the Housing Accelerator Fund, this $4 billion program, is aimed at municipalities to increase home building, to speed up the process? Is it generally that's what its focus is?
More specifically, to secure systemic reforms when it comes to zoning and permitting process, with a goal of them building more homes over time.
Right. So how many municipalities now have you done deals with?
I think we have 11 that are 7 signed. But, okay, we're 7 signed, but there are more where we have got more or less agreements wrapped up, plus
In the works?
The province of Quebec.
So this is a $4 billion fund that was promised in 2021.
It was campaigned
But
on
actually,
in
it wasn't
2021.
started in till 2022.
It was budgeted for in 2022 and then started rolling out in September of this year.
Gotcha. Okay. So in London, as an example, the deal there was it hinged, from what we can tell in the media, it hinged on the notion of the city permitting 4 units as of right. Was that roughly?
That was one of the suggested areas where the application could have been strengthened. There were a few others included in the letter that I had sent to the mayor, Josh Morgan of the City of London, some of which they had already been actioning, but that was one of the elements that we suggested they could do to go further. Whether it would depend on what you mean by hinged upon, but it was certainly an area that we were encouraging.
It was an
the city
important
to
element of the agreement.
I think it's very important.
Yeah.
It allowed them to be the first out of the gate.
So this program would be an acknowledgement, really, that local red tape is part of the problem, it's part of the issue. In terms
Absolutely,
of
and
getting
through our
more homes built.
conversations, I know that's something we agree upon.
Right. So, of course, unfortunately, housing starts are down in London, about 32%, which actually mirrors the national average between 2022 and 2023. So, obviously, these agreements are designed to clear up some red tape and delays that cost money in the local markets. But it's not the only issue, is it? I'm going to use an example now of Arise Developments in Victoria. I'm sure we've talked about this before, where they would argue that the real driver of delays in getting more housing started today is interest rates and inflation. Luke, I'll give you an example. In 2020, his company built 27 new apartments. So between the cost of land, labor, materials, everything, was just over $5.3 million to get that done in 2020. 3 years later, those same costs today would be $8.4 million, about a 60% increase. And 3 years ago, the interest on the project, the money to borrow, the interest was about $247,000. And he says today, his interest costs on that same project would be $1.1 million. That's about a 345% increase since 2020. So, acknowledging that local red tape is an issue, there's no question about that, and this fund is supposed to help sort that out, which I'm not sure it is yet. What about inflation?
The rising cost of building is certainly one of the factors. That's why I led in my presentation today with the need to make the math work for builders. Materials and supplies have increased, land has increased, interest has impacted the financial equation. That's why we're addressing those issues not through the Housing Accelerator Fund, which is meant to address a separate problem, but that's why we've decided to remove the GST for new apartment construction. That is why we have low-cost financing opportunities that pass on the low borrowing costs in exchange for commitments for builders to offer homes at reasonable prices. It is why we re-securitize the Canada Mortgage Bond Program to reduce risks that will have a flow-through impact of providing lower rates of borrowing to builders. Certainly the cost of building is one piece of the pie. It's an important piece, and we need to advance measures that address that problem as we are advancing measures that address the separate problem of red tape at a municipal level.
Do you agree with the governor of the Bank of Canada and Scotiabank economists who also say that excessive government spending and borrowing is a key driving factor in inflation and therefore hikes in interest rates?
It can be. If you actually look at the breakdown that they've indicated, you'll see that primarily the spending that they're talking about is from provincial and municipal governments. The federal share represents a certain proportion of it, but they've largely pointed to the pandemic emergency spending that was necessary to float the economy. If you actually look at the
Hold on a second.
counterfactual, I think it's extremely important that you understand
but
the
just a
impact that
second,
would flow if
200
those
billion
investments were not made.
of that borrowing that the federal government did during the pandemic had nothing to do with the pandemic, though. And that's, and obviously provinces are part of the issue in terms of how much they borrow, but this government has borrowed dramatically.
So just
That
in
is
terms
now
of the
over $1 trillion, right?
So let's just look specifically about what you're talking about. Like if you're trying to separate out CERB or the wage subsidy, for example, and say that that's not part of the pandemic response, I would go to the wall to argue the contrary. The reality is we put spending measures in place that were designed largely to protect against economic scarring, not only to procure vaccines more quickly than most other countries in the world, not only to supplement the ability of provincial healthcare systems to continue to support people during an emergency, but also to literally float the ability of households and businesses to keep
I don't
food
know
on
if
the
we need
table.
to relitigate all of that stuff. All I'm
Given
saying
the
is that
contrary position of
government
the
debt
parties,
and
I think
borrowing
we
is clearly
must.
part of the issue. The Governor Bank of Canada has said so Scotiabank economists. And this government has definitely borrowed a great deal of money. Our national debt is now over $1 trillion, and that's adding to the impact. Former the Liberal Finance Minister John Manley even said the exact same thing. So I'm wondering if you'll acknowledge that. Or I guess I'm wondering, are you one of the cabinet ministers that sits in cabinet meetings with the PMO and says we gotta rein in the spending and borrowing too to help?
My view is that we need to spend responsibly. During the pandemic, it was responsible to make sure we protected the long-term interests of the economy. Right now, we need to demonstrate that we are going to spend within our means, and we're going to necessarily show a downward track when it comes to spending relative to our GDP. And when I actually look at the international comparisons, so this is in what's felt in communities, we are trending very much in the right direction compared to international counterparts.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Long for 5 minutes, 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, colleagues and ministers. Thank you so much for coming. And thank you for the work you do on behalf of Canadians. Minister Fraser, as you've said many times before, and rightly so, the challenges we face as a country on housing are severe. They're urgent. But this is also something that's been unfolding over many, many years, over many, many governments. It's not something that just happened in the last 4 or 5 years. So I appreciate very much what our government is doing with respect to stepping up to the plate, as I'd say it, through, whether it's the co-investment fund, the Rapid Housing Initiative, the Housing Accelerator. And, I'm really proud to be on this committee that was there when we came out with the, National Housing Strategy and National Housing Program. Because we do have to act as a federal government. It's incumbent on us to do so. And I digress here, but, in the House, in Parliament, there's times, when opposition parties can do opposition motions, and sometimes those motions are to, flush out who voted, and then, you see in social media, well, they voted against this motion and that, and it's all over social media. And, obviously, everybody watching and everybody here knows what we just went through over the last weekend with respect to, 31 hours of voting. And hey, it's what we signed up for. It happens. And we did it. And those votes could have been done in one package and, done very quickly, but they weren't. So what that showed was line by line what the Conservative Party voted against. Line by line, item by item. And normally you wouldn't see that because it would be in a package. But what we did see over the weekend was a Conservative Party, and I had expected that maybe some members of the Conservative Party would have said, no, I can't support that. There'd be 3 or 4 votes on the other side. But no, it was voted as a block. And maybe they were told that, whipped that, what have you, but they all voted together. And we saw them vote against 71,000 new apartments, 15,500 new homes. We saw the Conservative Party vote against funding for housing for the most vulnerable, housing for veterans, when those groups need it the most. And hey, you know, the Conservative Party was the party that wanted to vote on these line by line. So it showed. It showed Canadians line by line what they didn't support. That's a fact. So I just want to start, Minister, by just kind of getting your comments on that. Were you surprised? And just how you felt about that over the weekend. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to respond. So the exercise that took place last week, not entirely surprising. You and I, having been both elected on the same day in 2015, have been through this exercise a few times. What I do find surprising is that as an individual member of Parliament, you have the ability to vote your conscience, vote which way you choose, and most often, as members of different parties share the worldview of their party, they will align with that party, but not always. You, in fact, have a reputation, Mr. Long, on occasion from going your own way, and I credit those who have the ability to understand when their community's interests are demand their vote in a certain direction. One of the things that I found curious about the exercise last week is that despite the fact there may, for procedural reasons, be a desire to break things down line by line, frustrate the proceedings in the House, there's nothing requiring a party or a member to vote a particular way on any of those line items. In fact, it would be entirely reasonable to say, let's break it all down so we can signal what we do support and what we don't support. But when I was reviewing the text of the motions as we were going through the voting exercise, to see that the Conservative Party had decided that they don't want to invest in affordable housing is a surprise. Although, if you actually do a little bit of research, you'll find that their leader has very brazenly said that Canada should get out of the housing business, as reflected by the position that they've held while in government not to invest in affordable housing. To your opening point, I should say no party is without sin when it comes to a failure to invest in affordable housing. For the part of the Liberal Party of Canada, there were years where we formed government where we too didn't invest in affordable housing the way that we ought to have, and we are living with those consequences today. But when I see a continued desire to oppose low-cost financing to build more apartments in this country, direct grants that will build more affordable housing, supports for emergency shelters for women and children, supports for veterans' homelessness, supports for Indigenous housing to help people who are separated from their home communities, and even more innocuous items that shouldn't be partisan in nature around flood protection for residential areas that will allow us to protect housing that exists or potentially build in different areas, it confounds me. What I expect happened is not attributable to malice, but perhaps partisanship. When there is a desire to say no based on who is proposing a measure without an analysis as to whether that analysis should help people, I would suggest that it signals the downward trend of the discourse and level of engagement that our constituents deserve.
Fraser, used your time. Madame Chabot, pour 6 minutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Minister. Thank you, Madam Minister, for being here today. I will talk to you. My question goes for you, Mr. Fraser. In the fall economic statement, there are amounts of money that will go partly to additionally finance affordable financing from 2025-2026. There's another amount of money of $15 billion for new loan financing still from 2025-2026. Mr. Minister, you know that 2025 will be a time for federal elections. So how can you guarantee, if housing is a priority, if social and affordable housing is a priority, how do you guarantee that we'll be able to do this?
Merci pour les questions.
Thank you for the question. It is understood to say that there are funds that exist today, even before the recent economic update. it's possible to continue using the funds that exist now to support efforts to construct houses. The economic update shows the commitments that are going to be made when the funds we have today are no longer available. So that will fund things after that time. It's important to acknowledge that there are some funds that will be quickly made available. For example, cooperative housing. This will start in the new year. Just to clarify, in English.
Important also to see that putting the funding in place now is going to flow to buildings when expenses are incurred. So we can actually book expenditures very soon for projects that are going through the application process, knowing that the funding will actually flow during the construction period. If you're building an apartment complex that will have 300 units, that's usually a multi-year project. So to the extent we can say there is going to be money in place today, we're going to be encouraging more builders who are filing building permits and advancing projects before construction starts, knowing that the money will be able to flow. So despite a later start date, we can actually book those expenditures sooner and continue to use money that's in the pipeline already.
Mr. Minister, beyond the figures, you know very well that we are experiencing a major housing crisis right now. The federal government can contribute. We know that there are provincial and municipal jurisdictions, but the federal government, through its national housing strategy, has decided to be involved in this. We are midway through the strategy. Correct me if I'm wrong, there's about 40 billion. Have you provided guidelines for this money? Mr. Minister, my question goes to you. Have you provided guidelines to make sure that the program will target affordable housing and social housing, and that will be able to act quickly with more agility? Other than that, we'll not be able to attain that objective. We've had about 3.5 million units by 2030. We are not even factoring in immigration. So the objective is to be agile and active and to speed up the construction of social and affordable housing. So how can we go faster to help people?
Oui, merci pour la question.
Yes, thank you for the question. In short, yes. There's an obligation to invest in affordable housing within the program, but there are many other programs that exist under the National Housing Strategy
that are directly tied to investments in affordable housing, and we can move more quickly by making policy changes, as we did during the Rapid Housing Initiative. However, there are other parts of our response, including some that have been advanced more recently, that are targeted at growing supply more broadly. So the Apartment Construction Loan Program, for example, provides low-cost financing in exchange for not rent geared to income apartments, but rent that will be offered at and below market prices. The GST, eliminating the GST on new apartments is meant to grow supply more broadly, which jurisdictions that have done similar measures demonstrate will free up more housing across the spectrum, including affordable housing. But some programs target specifically affordable housing. Others are more broad-based in their application.
40 seconds. I would have loved to create billions of units in 40 seconds. I think it's a concern for everyone to ensure that what we're seeing is that it takes 6-7 years for us to be able to see concrete results after the announcements. I think there should be a balance established between the needs and the actions. Acting only on social housing will not ensure affordability.
Look, my view is that we need to remain for the long term in the business of investing directly in social housing, but we also have to create conditions in partnership with other levels of government, the private sector, the nonprofit sector, and Indigenous leadership to build more housing across the market in addition to the social housing focus.
Madame Chabot, I understand, Ms. Kwan, you are going, because Ms. Cirillo has now appeared virtually again.
I'm asking.
Okay, Ms. Kwan for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the ministers and officials for being at the committee today. I want to jump right in. The Bank of Canada has actually said that investing in housing, community housing, social housing, co-op housing, is not inflationary spending. And there are a multitude of reports. The Scotiabank report, the Bank of Montreal report, amongst others, have indicated that Canada is way behind the 8 ball with respect to our social housing stock. We're at about 3.5%, and it's not even half of what the G7 countries are at. And so to that end, people are calling for the government to invest in social housing to at least bring us to the G7 average, which is 1.3 billion units. Others actually, including the Housing Advocate, is suggesting that we should actually bring our social housing stock up to 20%. We know that the Conservatives do not believe in social housing because their leader already said on the public record that social housing is a Soviet-style takeover of housing. I believe that the minister does not believe that. So to that end, will the government be investing in social housing to at least the level of doubling it where community advocates are calling for?
Thanks very much, and I agree. In fact, investing in social housing could be deflationary because it could bring the cost of rent down if you balance the supply and demand equation. The one challenge that you have is if you invest more quickly than the sector can build, it could, in theory, have an inflationary impact, but my view is we are not in that position today. So a short answer to your question is I want to significantly increase the proportion of non-market homes in this country. We have not formally broadcasted an official target as a Government of Canada. As we work towards releasing new measures in the new year, that is an exercise that I wish to undertake and to share publicly the details, but having not completed the consultation phase of that conversation, I don't want to prejudge the outcome of the conversations I would have. But striving for the OECD average seems like one reasonable bar to seek to meet. But until I have an opportunity to engage more broadly with the sector to identify what the appropriate goal for Canada should be and on what timeline, I hesitate to broadcast anything in advance of establishing a formal goal.
I would urge the minister to look at the Housing Advocates report, to which they just released, as has CHRA, to which Deloitte, they had commissioned Deloitte to do a report, and that indicated that productivity gains in the development of social housing would actually yield a return back to Canada's economy to the tune of up to $136 billion. That's good investments economically and socially, and I look forward to the next budget where the government will make good on those commitments and not just empty words as we have so often seen. Municipalities have called the crisis of gender-based violence an epidemic. And so is your government planning to restore the $150 million cuts to shelters? We know that the rates of violence have actually not decreased since the pandemic and have actually gone up. And this cut will cost lives. And are there any plans to ensure greater investment into shelter funding as a cost-saving measure for people fleeing violence?
So with respect to money for seeking to address homelessness through the Reaching Home program, we made a decision a while back to increase the funding by about $2 billion. I expect what you're referring to is the pandemic-related increases when you're talking about cuts that were designed for a period of time have exhausted, and we've returned to the pre-pandemic levels of funding. We have made decisions, though, to target specific groups, including women and transitional housing in particular, through different programs. The Rapid Housing Initiative would be a good example. In fact, one of the estimates, line items of the estimates we're considering today, is specific to shelters for women and children. So it will be a part of every policy that I put forward in the future, some of which have not been released publicly, but we will be looking to share more details as policies are ready to roll out. But we will always have a focus in each of these policies around protecting the interests of women and children, particularly those fleeing violence.
Very specifically, the shelters are full. Too often people are turned away. I myself have seen situations where families have been turned away, people are fleeing violence, and because they're unable to secure a shelter or housing, they have to return, they're forced to return to the abuser. That is the reality. And in spite of the lift over the pandemic period, even after the fact, we know that violence has actually gone up. So if anything, there should be greater investments and not reduced investments. So I would absolutely call on the government to look at that and also to engage with my colleague Leah Gazan, who is very active on this issue, and we need the government to take action because literally people's lives hang in the balance. I want to ask the question with respect to the federal land initiative. The government is only committing 30% of that initiative to affordable housing. Why is that? Why isn't 100% of that federal land initiative be dedicated to community housing for the people? It is, after all, public land that belongs to the people.
Can I just ask a point of clarity on the question? There's multiple programs that we use to build housing on federal lands. The Federal Lands Initiative is one of them. There was a recent announcement through other programs involving federal lands with Minister Duclos. Are you speaking specifically to the Federal Lands Initiative, or are you including the recent announcement that Minister Duclos would have made?
Well, the Federal Land Initiative.
Okay. So we, the Federal Lands Initiative, and I may pass to officials just on some of the technical details, is designed to make federal land available that we then divest to organizations, but put additional measures in place to grow housing, to build housing. My view is that we both have to make sure that an individual development can work financially with according subsidies to provide, but I actually think mixed-use neighborhoods that have a range of different incomes provide for healthy outcomes for the people who live in them. I think we should be doing more to insist that more new developments across Canada include a proportion of affordable housing. I do have some hesitancy about insisting that an entire neighborhood must exclusively be affordable housing, because I don't like the way that neighborhoods have come to develop when that approach has been taken.
Thank you, Ms.
It's not going to be a
Kwan.
whole
Mr.
neighborhood, it's one
Fraser,
parcel of land.
Mr. Aitchison, for 5 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Minister, you're on record as saying that housing is a crisis. At this committee, a few months ago, you agreed that we have a crisis on our hands, and your Housing Accelerator Fund is part of a response to that. I would say that my concern with it is, in fact, that just trying to spend our way to the crisis is not really going to work, and it's proving that it's not working because it's making things more expensive. It's more expensive to build. So I guess what I'm wondering then is if, ideologically, the Liberals want to spend their way out of the crisis, but there's all kinds of examples. The Federal Lands Initiative is a good example of that, where the long, arduous process for a piece of property to be declared surplus by the government doesn't really quite capture the need. It takes too long, for one, and then the concept of something being surplus. I'll give you an example of a post office in Burnaby. I was standing next to it. It was surrounded by residential towers. It was built in the 60s. It's listed as the condition of it is listed as poor. Post office keeps losing money. The city wanted it for a developer to build a new tower there. They would give them space on the main floor for a new post office, and the response back was, well, it's not surplus. Is that the highest and best use? You're familiar with the concept of highest and best use in planning, Minister? You're familiar with that, right? So I guess obviously we're not thinking in the terms of highest and best use, which I think would be a more appropriate response to a crisis. I'm thinking too. Are you familiar with the project Fisher and Baseline Road here in Ottawa, next to the experimental farm? It's been delayed by the Ministry of Agriculture. I wonder if you've chatted with them about it. 400-hectare farm in the middle of a metropolis of 1 million people. and the Ministry of Agriculture is concerned about a tiny corner of that 400 hectares being affected by shadows, which looks like most of the time will only be in December when things don't really grow in the experimental farm, and yet it's being held up and delays. This is another example of the things that you're saying you're going to try to push municipalities to get out of the way with your accelerator fund, which is, owing more money. But there's all kinds of examples where the federal government could just get out of the way and let the private sector build, but we make it more expensive. So I'm wondering if you can help me understand that in a crisis, it's literally leaving no stone unturned. And I've given you two examples. I can give you another example in the city of Whitehorse, where the city of Whitehorse has been asking. You met with the mayor of Whitehorse last week. I did too. 419 Range Road, home to a really aging federal office building. It's not full. It's surrounded by new schools. The city would like it for housing, and they just keep getting told it's not surplus. Is it the highest and best use of that land? Is this the response of a government that recognizes we're in a housing crisis? I'm struggling here.
Well, let me do my best to help put the conversation on track. So first of all, I do believe sincerely that it will take federal investment as well as provincial and municipal investments to get out of the housing crisis. I don't view this to being a strategy to spend our way out of the housing crisis. It's a recognition that it's going to take investments, particularly when you're dealing with non-market housing, to actually meet the needs of communities and the families who live within them. I think we have a 30-year experiment of cuts in Canada to affordable housing that have proved conclusively you cannot solve a housing crisis by making cuts, but you certainly can create one, and I vow not to take that approach. Despite our disagreement on the role of the federal government making investments versus cuts to escape the housing crisis, you'll perhaps surprisingly find that I have a lot of agreement with you on the use of federal land, in particular on the issue of the process of declaring surplus certain properties. I've seen the Canada Post Office in Metrotown. I've gone to Burnaby, and I've seen it surrounded by towers that are 40 and 50 stories that could be providing homes to additional people. Of course, Canada Post operates as a Crown Corporation independent of decisions taken by the government of the day. But one of the policies that I intend to review in collaboration with my colleagues is how we can better unlock opportunities for properties that have not yet been declared surplus. Let's not look only at Canada Post Corporation and other Crown corporations, but there are government departments that conduct business that is not necessarily incompatible with housing. I've had a conversation with a number of my cabinet colleagues to identify some of those opportunities. But with respect to your other questions, you've noted a couple other examples in Whitehorse and with the agricultural farm. There may be unique nuances. If you're concerned about the issue that played out with shadows, largely a conversation between Ag Canada and the City of Ottawa, I have put on paper my objection to policies around shadow cover getting in the way of housing. There may be something that needs to be discussed for the operational needs of the agricultural farm, but I'll leave it to my colleague to work that out with the City of Ottawa. But my view is we need to look at every opportunity to reform our policies, including properties that have not been declared surplus, to identify opportunities to build more housing.
Thank you, Mr. H.
We should chat about this after the meeting as well.
Okay, and the clock doesn't end after the meeting. Thank you, Minister. You can have lots of time then. Mr. Collins for 5 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the ministers for their attendance here this morning. Mr. Fraser, you've been very clear in terms of emphasizing the importance of working with other levels of government and other partners in the space to get us out of the housing crisis. And you've also been very clear in terms of making investments are important in terms of getting us, of reaching the objectives and goals that we have as it relates to building new housing supply and, more importantly, new affordable housing supply. I want to address the issue of the all-of-government approach and focus on the provinces very quickly. When Ms. Gillis was here a couple of months ago, I had the opportunity to ask about creating the same healthy tension with provinces that we've created with municipalities. Accelerator Fund's a great example. Incentivizing them to come to the table when they may be reluctant with policies and or finances. I'm in the unenviable position of living in a province where they don't have an affordable housing policy. They don't have a housing policy, much like the members opposite, their conservative cousins federally. They have taken the trickle-down approach where they just hope that these things happen philanthropically through the private development industry, and they don't happen, as we know. As you pointed that out, that didn't happen for 30 years. So can I get an understanding in terms of what we're doing to create healthy tensions with the provinces, specifically the province of Ontario? We're providing billions of dollars in infrastructure investments. I'll use transit as an example. How do we ensure that, in this case, the province of Ontario is at the table at a minimum on the housing side of things to support the initiatives that we have and that municipalities are bringing to the table as well?
Look, thank you for the question, and I think it's a really important one because you'll appreciate that from a technical point of view, there are other levels of government who are listed in the Constitution as having a housing a jurisdiction over housing issues. We want to play a leadership role federally because we see that there is a problem that has reached a national scale, despite the fact it may not officially fall into Section 91 of the Constitution. We have an opportunity to make a difference, and we can leverage the federal spending power to incentivize the kind of change that we want to see. That was the rationale for the Housing Accelerator Fund, as you alluded to, and we've incentivized municipal change by putting federal money on the table. Lo and behold, as the funding rolls out, you see the rapid adoption of new policies adopted at a municipal level. We can adopt a similar approach in dealing with provinces and territories who absolutely must play a role, not only in the policies that will help get housing built, but the policies that are going to help get infrastructure built so the homes people live in are not storage units for their families at night, but a place where they can live as part of a thriving community where they can fully participate in life in Canada. We're proposing going forward of attaching housing conditionality to certain federal transfers that go to provinces. You've mentioned the public transit funding that we've been investing over the last number of years. Going forward, the model will include agreements with metro areas that may leverage provincial funding as well. But you can bet your bottom dollar that we're going to see that there's going to be high density near large transit stations and more density near smaller ones. You can look at opportunities like the Canada Community Building Fund, which we will be renewing in advance of the upcoming fiscal year. And you should expect to see, and primarily that is a flow through of federal money through provinces to municipalities. There's some exceptions where we deal directly with municipality, the City of Toronto, for example. However, we have an opportunity to attach housing conditionality to some of those transfers. So these are items that we are dealing with in real time. And as we launch the next round of negotiations with metro region transit providers or provincial governments, we intend to say it's not enough for you to put a certain number of dollars on the table. You need to demonstrate that this money is going to enable more housing. And frankly, we need to do that internal to our own government as well, in working with other Crown corporations and with different government departments to say, hey, maybe not as a condition of a funding transfer for perhaps obvious reasons, but we need to constantly ask ourselves questions. What more can we be doing within our departments and within other levels of government that are going to leverage a positive social outcome, in this case, when it comes to building more homes for Canadians?
Thanks, Minister. Mr. Chair, 40 seconds, very quickly. I think
35 now.
One of the biggest issues that we've raised in the last couple of months is the removal of GST from purpose-built rentals. We have a position that's in stark contrast to the Leader of the Opposition. Can you outline the importance of that and how we differ in that regard?
If we don't build more supply, we will never escape the housing crisis. The decision to eliminate GST from new apartments is designed to build more supply. We have estimates between 200 and 300,000 new apartments that will come online as a result of that one policy change. It is a big deal. What gives me comfort that we're going to achieve that is we saw provincial governments line up afterwards to say, we want to do this too. In fact, some were out in front of us. The key difference between what the parties are proposing is whether you're going to have a broad-based program to grow supply or whether you're going to cut it off for apartments above a certain value. That would have the unfortunate consequence of creating an enormous level of bureaucracy. It would slow down the process of building, but it would also eliminate the ability of builders to build mixed-use developments, which I described in favorable terms earlier. My view is that we need to do everything we can to build as many homes as possible, including a blanket waiver of the GST.
Pour 2 minutes et demi. Madame Chabot, à vous.
Oui. Merci.
Thank you. I'll continue with demand and supply. We're talking about the market forces. Considering that here when we talk about the housing crisis in particular, whether it's housing for students, even for our soldiers, we saw the situation, and we are talking about modest income, low income. Is it the right approach to target only demand and supply to guarantee that the housing supply will increase faster than rentals? I'm not relying on the private sector here. In my constituency, there's no problem with rentals. Where we have a problem is with affordable social housing. Unfortunately, we are talking about conditions imposed on the provinces or on the municipalities. This delays the projects a lot. We saw this recently with the acquisition fund. Quebec had to wait for months and months while waiting for the agreements to be signed, whereas no housing units are built, nothing at all. So I think we need to change our approach, and to review the approaches to deal with the situation before us. Do you agree with me?
Je suis en Is it the federal government's role to invest in affordable housing? Yes, indeed. But we need to create the economic conditions that ensure that the market is working for everyone. Talking about social housing, I think that's why the province of Quebec negotiated the accelerator fund to build housing units. When I looked at the studies following conversations we had with experts, it's important to invest in affordable housing. That's for sure. But it's also important to make sure that the market is working, because when there's a certain level of units built in an area, someone who is using a new building leaves an old building. See a positive cascading impact, and when you build more supply, it creates a new level of affordability in the market, in addition to building social housing for people who cannot afford to participate in the market.
Merci, Madame Chabot. Madame Kwan, pour 2 minutes et demi.
Thank you. First, could I get the minister to provide to the committee a list of the municipalities to which they have received the accelerated fund and the terms associated with it as well?
I'll provide whatever we have. If they're just, I will only hesitate in case there's anything that a municipality may have requested remain confidential, which I would respect, but I have no problem providing whatever would not be subject to ordinary confidentiality provisions.
Okay. On the issue around housing, it's one thing to build stock, it's another thing to actually stop the loss of stock. I've not heard actually the minister talk about that. The NDP has called for a variety of different measures, including a moratorium, including changing the special tax provision for real estate investment trusts, for example, an acquisition fund. Are any of those measures that the NDP has called for to hold the stock to ensure that the housing crisis does not get worse is being entertained by the government?
Yes, thank you. You're absolutely correct to point this out as a problem. We can't just build our way out of it. We need to stop the loss of existing affordable units that may not be owned by a nonprofit. I'm looking at different options right now on how to address this problem. I don't have an announcement to make at committee today, but I'm trying to determine the best way that the federal government can use its tools to prevent the loss of affordable housing stock by creating a more level playing field for, in particular, nonprofit actors.
Time is of the essence. As we talk, as the time passes, more stock is being lost right now. I want to touch on the question around infrastructure. The minister talked about whole communities. Of course, that's important. Increasing density, building more stock also means that the infrastructure around the community needs to go with it. FCM has actually raised this issue as a major concern. If you talk to municipalities, they've brought it up over and over again, and that's on both hard infrastructure as well as soft infrastructure. What resources is the government making available in response to FCM's call and municipalities' call for infrastructure to support the housing?
There will be a handful of programs that I won't be able to exhaust in the time I have, Mr. Chair, but suffice it to say, this is what motivated our investments in part going back to 2017 with the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Plan. As that comes to the tail of a significant record-setting series of investments in infrastructure, we now have a series of other programs designed to target different kinds of infrastructure. So we've locked funding in for the Permanent Public Transit Fund that's going to help people move from where they live to where they need to be. We've got the Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund, which is rolling out to make communities more resilient to climate change. We have the Canada Community Building Fund that is designed to provide flexibility to municipalities to focus on their priorities, and we'll be looking to develop a next generation of infrastructure programs that will meet the needs on a go-forward basis to ensure communities are building complete communities and not just new buildings.
Sewer and water.
Yes, and thank you.
Does the committee agree to Mr. Morris one short question? Is it okay? Okay. Nobody objected. Mr. Morris, one question to the minister?
Well, thank you, colleagues. I appreciate that. And thank you, Chair. Minister, I share Ms. Kwan's concern with corporate landlords who are buying multi-unit residential buildings in my community. They are renovating, evicting folks, and raising rents. And the federal government, as you know, is incentivizing this behavior by providing tax exemptions to groups like real estate investment trusts. This is not about new supply. This is about keeping existing units affordable. And we know that removing this exemption would actually create $300 million to build more affordable housing. Won't solve the crisis, but it's a litmus test for whether this government is serious about addressing financialization. Nothing was done in the fall economic statement on it. I was encouraged by your comments earlier. Can you be more specific about the action we can see in terms of addressing financialization?
Short answer, Mr.
How much? When you say short answer, how much time, Mr. Chair?
Until somebody calls to adjourn.
Okay. In 1 minute, I will not do your question justice, so we'll happily offer to follow up perhaps before we leave Ottawa this week. So there's a number of different aspects that we can look at on financialization, including, for example, short-term rentals, which is a different form of financialization, which was, in fact, addressed in the fall economic statement. The path forward in the short term, for me, is to look at opportunities so we can actually level the playing field by nonprofit actors with those who might be making investments in real estate right now. I do have some hesitation to look at measures that will upset the ability of people who are in the housing market to remain in the housing market, but there's more to talk about on that piece. But in the meantime, I sense there's widespread agreement within the sector to create opportunities supported by the federal government to broaden the ability of nonprofits to actually snap up those spaces. The trend that I'm watching increasingly amongst investors is that they're not necessarily taking advantage of that opportunity that you've described the same way today as they were even just a few years ago when interest rates during the pandemic were at basement levels. But I think it creates an opportunity for us to deal with nonprofits who are not motivated by making money, but who are motivated by protecting that stock in the market. And that's the mechanism through which we look at that is something I'm considering now.
Thank you, committee members. With that, we'll adjourn. See you on Wednesday. Meeting adjourned.